Imagine this, you've been preparing for months. You booked the perfect flight, the dream hotel, you even planned out every detail of your itinerary. You arrive at the airport, excited, go through immigration, settle into your seat, and in less than an hour you already want to get off the plane. Who's to blame? That seat you chose with so much hope, the one everyone recommended to you. The one that, at first glance, seems like an advantage, but is actually a trap disguised as an opportunity. Today I'm going to reveal why one of the most popular seats among travelers can, paradoxically, be the one that ruins your trip before you even take off. And no, we're not talking about the classic middle seat or the one next to the bathroom. This story is much more subtle and much more treacherous. For many people, choosing an emergency exit row seat, for example, almost sounds like a secret luxury. More legroom, they say. Perfect for stretching out, they think. What few people know is that behind that promise of comfort lies one of the biggest disappointments a traveler can experience. First, these seats usually don't recline. Yes, exactly what you don't want to hear on an 8, 10, or even 14-hour flight. While you watch the passengers in front of you lean their seats back and get comfortable to sleep, you'll have to keep your back straight, as if you were stuck in an endless waiting room. And that's not the end of the story. In case of an emergency, the passengers in this row are responsible for helping to open the door and assist others. Can you imagine being half asleep and having the safety of half the plane depend on you? Not to mention that if, for any reason, the staff thinks you're not fit for the task, whether it's because of your age, physical condition, or just bad luck, they can move you to another seat, probably a worse one. Plus, even though many people think these seats are always free, on many airlines they're considered premium and come with an extra cost. Ironically, you pay more for less comfort. This choice hides several details that most people don't find out about until it's too late. First, not all emergency exit seats are the same. On some planes, the first row of emergency exit seats, the ones right next to the door, can't recline at all. And it's not a design flaw, it's a safety regulation. And if you're thinking, well, at least I have more space, there's a little twist. The extra space can be invaded by other passengers stretching their legs into your area, or worse, by people using that aisle to stand, line up for the bathroom, or just stretch out. There's also a psychological aspect that not many people consider. Sitting next to an emergency exit means that in a critical situation, you'd be the one responsible for taking action. Opening the door, helping other passengers, staying calm. Another key point, invisible restrictions. On many flights, if you're in these seats, you can't have bags, backpacks, or electronic devices on the floor during takeoff and landing. Everything has to go in the overhead compartments. And to top it all off, the price. Nowadays, many airlines charge an extra fee for these seats, selling them as extra legroom seats or seats with extra space for your legs. Now that you know why the emergency exit seat can be a trap, get ready for another airline letdown. What happens if you pay for a window seat and find out there's no window? Imagine you paid extra for your seat. Imagine that, excited, you chose the window seat, dreaming of seeing the sunrise over the clouds, taking those unique photos, or simply resting your head and sleeping better. And now imagine that, when you sit down, you discover there's no window at all. Just a plain, smooth, cold wall. Sound like a nightmare? Well, it's more common than you think. In the aviation industry, there's a curious phenomenon that many passengers don't find out about until it's too late: phantom window seats. What exactly are we talking about? In certain airplane models, like the popular Boeing 737-700 or the Airbus A320neo, there are rows where, even though the seat is next to the window, there isn't an actual window there, or it's so misaligned that you can barely see a piece of the wing or, even worse, nothing at all. The reason? It's purely a structural issue. Planes need to leave space for internal components, emergency systems, wing mechanisms, or structural reinforcements. At those spots, it's simply not possible to install a window, but to avoid changing the overall seat layout, the airline still sells that row as a window seat. The problem? Airlines usually don't make this clear. You won't notice it on basic seat maps, and if you don't do your research beforehand, you could end up paying a premium price. Yes, many window seats come with an extra charge, only to find out that your only view is the plastic of the cabin wall. Did you know that, according to Seat Guru, there are more than 40 airplane configurations where these missing windows exist? And even worse, on some flights, the rows with engines or emergency exits often sacrifice windows as well to increase structural strength. That's why, if you love aerial views, if you were hoping to rest your head against the wall, or if you just wanted to feel less claustrophobic during the flight, a phantom window seat can completely ruin your experience. You'll find out why the last row, which many people choose without thinking, can be a hidden punishment or, surprisingly, an advantage if you know how to use it. Sometimes, what seems harmless hides more traps than we imagine. And on a plane, that quiet last row could turn into the worst mistake of your trip or a master move, if you know how to play your cards right. The last row of a plane is like that seat in the theater that nobody wants, isolated, forgotten, and full of surprises. Many passengers end up there simply because it was the only thing left, without giving it much thought. But what few people know is that this spot has much bigger implications than just being close to the bathroom, the classic comment everyone already knows. First, the big drawback. On most planes, the seats in the last row don't recline. Why? Because they're right up against the rear bulkhead, meaning that wall that separates the cabin from the restrooms or the galley. With no physical space behind, reclining is simply not possible. Second, the location works against you in other ways. You're the last to get food and drinks. When the crew starts in-flight service, they usually begin at the front of the plane. Last to disembark. After landing, when everyone starts getting anxious to get off, you'll be one of the last to leave. Third, the hidden detail. The constant flow of people getting up to use the bathroom, especially on long flights, makes the last row one of the busiest areas. But it's not all bad. Some experienced travelers actually prefer the last row precisely because no one sits behind you. And do you know what that means? 0 kicks to the back, 0 sudden seat reclines from the passenger behind you. A strange kind of peace, a bubble of isolation in the middle of the airplane's activity. Do you see what I mean? Sometimes, even the worst seat can have a hidden perk. But don't get too comfortable just yet, because there's another, less obvious trap that can ruin your trip from the very first minute. The drama of the middle seat, where the real battle in the air isn't fought in the sky, but over the armrests. Everyone dreads it, but few truly understand the real reason why. The middle seat isn't just uncomfortable, it's the invisible stage of a silent war. A war fought with elbows, glances, sighs, and one that very few ever win. Sitting in the middle seat is like being the middle child in a big family. No one asks what you want. Everyone expects you to adapt, and your personal space simply doesn't exist. But beyond the cliché of not having a window or an aisle, there's a deeper and more subtle problem, the battle for the armrests. Think about it for a moment. The window seat passenger has complete control over their side space. They can lean slightly against the fuselage, look at the scenery, or rest to sleep without anyone bothering them. The aisle passenger, on the other hand, has the freedom to move around. They can get up whenever they want, stretch their legs, and access the overhead compartment more easily. And what about the person in the middle? Trapped, squeezed in, unable to move without asking for permission, no window to lean on, no easy way out to the aisle. And worst of all, both side armrests become no man's land. Who has the right to use them? Should the middle passenger just accept not using either one? Or do they have the moral right to both, as compensation for their unfortunate fate? But there's something even worse. If you need to sleep, the middle seat is a sentence. You can't lean to either side without invading someone else's space. You can't really stretch your legs. You can't easily get out to go to the bathroom. If you can't avoid the middle seat, because sometimes there's just no choice, the best thing is to be the first one to sit down. That way, you can discreetly claim at least one armrest and stake out your territory before your neighbors arrive. Now that we've survived the ordeal of the middle seat, there's an even less obvious trap that could make your flight even more unbearable. Did you know that some airlines squeeze more seats into the same space by making each one smaller? Yes, they literally shrink us to fit more passengers in. Have you ever felt like airplane seats are narrower than they used to be? It's not your imagination. It's a strategy, and without realizing it, you've been part of it. The airline industry has perfected a silent tactic to maximize their profits, shrinking passengers without them noticing. How do they do it? It's very simple, by adding more seats than usual into the same cabin space. In the past, on many short and medium-haul planes like the Airbus A320 or the Boeing 737, standard configurations offered relative comfort, enough legroom, decently wide seats, and a reasonable sense of mobility. But the pressure to cut costs and increase profitability has led many airlines, especially low-cost carriers, to redesign the internal layout of their planes. More rows added, thinner seats, reduced space between rows. Some versions of the Airbus A320, for example, went from having 150 seats to 180 or even 186, in the same fuselage structure. The result? Each passenger has less space for their legs and hips. Sometimes, there are barely 28 inches of seat pitch, when the recommended amount would be between 31 and 34. These slimmed-down seats not only reduce space, they also use less padding to save weight and money on fuel. So if you notice that the seat cushion feels like a sheet of cardboard, now you know why. After learning about all the hidden tricks that can ruin your trip, it's time for the most important part, how to actually choose the best seat on a plane and avoid falling into the same traps that catch thousands of passengers every day. Choosing the right seat isn't a matter of luck. It's a bit of a science, a mix of information, strategy, and, let's be honest, a little bit of cleverness. Here are the key tips that the most experienced travelers use, and that very few people share. 1. Research the aircraft model before booking. 2. Use SeatGuru or similar websites. 3. Avoid seats near bathrooms and galleys. 4. Prioritize your personal needs. 5. Consider paying for a premium seat only if it truly improves your experience. 6. Book as early as possible. 7. Ask at the counter before boarding. Traveling should be an experience that brings you closer to your dreams, not a punishment where you count the hours wishing you'd arrive. And while we can't control everything that happens in the air, we can control something crucial, where and how we experience that journey. So next time you see a seat option, don't just go with your first impulse. Do your homework, choose wisely, and get ready to enjoy your flight from the very first minute.